On today's Locked On Jayhawks, KU football is back. Football season's back. We preview the KU Lindenwood game, why the Jayhawks should dominate on Thursday night.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. You can find our show here. It's called Locked On Jayhawks, anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. And on today's episode, we're previewing Kansas Lindenwood. We're going to get into the matchup. We'll get to our matchups of the game, player matchups to watch, Hawks to Soar, and we're going to pick a prop based on some FanDuel odds. So thank you for tuning into the show. Of course, we'll have a postcast after the game that you can catch either Thursday night or Friday morning whenever you get around to it. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, which fixes tired fast with zero sugar in a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. So Kansas takes on Lindenwood. This is a game that Kansas comes in as a heavy favorite. The line opened up at like 43.5 on FanDuel, and it's already moved to 44.5, at least at time of recording. By the time you listen to this, watch this, by the time it gets the game time and it kicks off, maybe it ends up even being more than that. Obviously, some of the early money coming in on Kansas there, and honestly, I would be leaning toward taking Kansas minus the points, even with that many in this game, which I'll get to reasons why throughout the show today. So tune in, obviously. But this is the first ever matchup between these two teams. This is also the first ever matchup against an FBS opponent for Lindenwood. This is a Lindenwood program that went from NAIA football, moved up, kept moving up, eventually moved up to the FCS last season. This is their second year in the FCS, and now this is their first FBS opponent. They went 3-7 last year in the FCS in kind of a transition period for them. I think all KU fans would now be comfortable with KU running up the score because this is David Beatty's alma mater. But in all seriousness, like, this is one that Kansas should just dominate. And it's really about a little bit of everything. Like, when you look at some of these past FCS opponents that KU has played, I don't know who would be considered worse between like this one or Rhode Island, but from whatever that was, like 2016, 2015, 2017, it's in the discussion. And Kansas is at a place as a program where they're better than they were in any of those past years. And Kansas has more depth. A lot of the players who are going to be playing, if you're blowing them out in the third quarter, the fourth quarter, maybe they're young players, but they're very talented. They're 3 stars, they're 4 stars. They're guys who are going to be the next wave of dudes in Lawrence, and that's going to set you up that you should be able to dominate this football game. As Brian Borland said last week at a press conference, this game is about Kansas. This is me kind of paraphrasing. It's not as much about the opponent. I think the way he said it is the game is about us. Like, it's about us. And what he basically meant by that is, like, if we take care of business, if we do what we need to do, we're going to win this game, right? Like, our A game is going to be better than their A game. Our A game, KU's A game is going to be better than Lindenwood's or 100% game. Like, KU's C game might be able to win this game. Obviously, you don't go into the game, and Brian Borland's not going to stand on a chair and be like, hey, guys, C game or better. Let's do it, right? That's not going to happen. But point being, Kansas should be able to dominate. And as long as they don't do a lot of stupid things, you're going to be able to blow out your opponent. Lindenwood ranks outside the top 100 FCS teams, according to Bill Connolly's preseason ESPN SP+. This is not a top 100 FCS team, at least according to one metric on paper. Bill Connolly, actually, same guy, put together a list of the ESPN SP+ rankings with all teams from FBS, FCS, Division II, Division III, and NAIA schools. Interestingly enough, Wisconsin Whitewater, who Lance Leipold used to coach and won a bunch of championships there, Wisconsin Whitewater is ranked higher by about 30 spots. They're at 251. Lindenwood's at 280. So when you add together all the FBS, FCS, all these other schools, if you view Kansas as top 25 opponent, it's a top 25 team against a team who's rated 280. Like, if we view that from a basketball is even different because, like, in football, there is the physical element. Basketball, it's like you get too physical, you're going to, or like a team could just get hot from three. But theoretically, if Kansas was playing a team in basketball who's ranked 280th, you'd be like, okay, the point spread's like 35 points, you know? There are actually 3 Division III schools. There's handfuls of Division II schools that are ahead of Lindenwood, and there's almost an NAIA school. So, point being, Kansas is the much better team. This should be domination. Kansas shouldn't have to, nor should they want to, have to show off your full playbook in this game, especially with Illinois lurking next, 9-win UNLV after that, tough Big 12 opener against West Virginia on the road after that, Big 12 play after that. You don't want to have to show everything on film. Now, should you maybe show a few things that can be on film that can make the opposition have to worry about it, spend extra time in scouting? Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe you'll just want to work on a few concepts in game, but you're not going to like overly do it. That makes sense. But I know like earlier this week, there was a comment from Lance Leipold talking about that they're going to do everything in their power to win this game. And I think that was a good way of wording it from Lance Leipold, in that the idea that they're going to give a full playbook is not real. And I understand why Lance Leipold would say that. And again, I think he phrased it in a way where he's saying, like, we're going to give our all to win this game, was kind of the way he phrased it, which is like, that's true. They're going to try 100%. But it's not going to be a full playbook. And yes, again, he's not going to come out there and say that. Like, if somebody in the media asks him point blank, like, are you going to use all your plays? Are you going to have a full playbook? He might say yes, but that's coach speak stuff. That's not trying to give bulletin board material to the opposition. That's trying to keep the opposition on their toes and preparing for everything, right? There are reasons why he would say it like that. Like, I have no problem with why he would say it like that. But from my perspective, I'm telling you, it's not going to be a full playbook. And the reason I point out to that is just, one, look at like every other team is going to be playing an FCS team that they should blow out. Probably not going to be a full playbook. Now, if you're Colorado playing North Dakota State, you're Oklahoma State playing South Dakota State, probably will be a full playbook because those are going to be tough games. They're like 9.5-point favorites in each. But look back to 2 years ago, right? Look back to the game against Tennessee Tech. How many times did Kansas run like the option, triple option in that game? There was one off the top of my head. It might have been twice. Then fast forward to the next 2 weeks against West Virginia and Houston in 2022. How many times did they run option? It was like half the plays. Maybe not that much, like a quarter of the plays. I don't know. You look back to last year. How adventurous did they get with the playbook? How adventurous did they get with formations and motions? Right? There's a few things they sprinkled in. For the most part, it was just, hey, wide zone, halfback dive, basic plays. We're just going to run it down your throat. You can't stop us because we're just better than you. And that's what I expect in this game. You should just be better than them. You should just be able to run base plays and dominate. But I think without a doubt, whether Kansas wins this game by 70, whether they win by 40, whether the starters play for a quarter, a half, 3 quarters, it's just exciting to have KU football back. It's exciting to have football back in general. It's exciting to see some of these guys, right? Whether it's Jalon Daniels, Devin Neal, Kobe Bryant, Melo Dotson, some of these guys that you're seeing for the last time this year, or I guess in Jalen's case, could be the last time. And in a situation where, if you went back to 2020, end of the 2020 season, you don't even talk about like January of 2021, coming off an 0-9 season off of COVID. If you went back and told yourself, just wait, man, in 3.5 years from now, you're going to be having conversations with your friends, coworkers, right, whatever it is, about that, hey, Big 12's wide open. Kansas could win it. Kansas could make the college football playoff. And a lot of the guys who are having their last go-around this year are as big of a reason as anything is why. They've uplifted this program. They've brought it to this point where if you would have said that to yourself 3.5 years ago, you would have sounded like a crazy person. You would have been the ultimate optimist that would have just been saying things just to say them, to try to say something hopeful. But now it's true. And 3.5 years later, Kansas has a chance to do those things. And this is the start of that. Even if it's not the biggest opponent, it is the start of that. And you get to see these players. You don't know how many more games you're going to get to see each and every one of them. Enjoy what you can. Let's get to our matchups of the game, players to watch, Hawks to Soar, all that on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We're brought to you by 5 Hour. No better time for me to do this read than right now because you're going to Thursday night football game. What does that mean? Probably have work the next day on Friday, right? And the game starts at 7. Could get over at 10. I don't know. Maybe it's a faster game. Could be over by 10:30. I don't know. And then all of a sudden you're driving home, right? I mean, I don't know where you live. Maybe you live in Topeka and you're going from Kansas City, Kansas to Topeka, about an hour drive plus whatever traffic there is. You might not be getting home till midnight, maybe a little later, and you got to calm down from the vibes of the game. You need that energy boost the next day to get through work. And this could happen any day when you need that energy boost, where 5 Hour Energy is the brand that hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find the 5 Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience store, drugstore, and grocery store nationwide. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. It cannot be used without or with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders, so go to 5hourenergy.com today. Thank you to everydayers tuning into each and every episode. Don't forget you can make your second listen Locked On College Football to get you ready for the big weekend ahead. Okay, we're going to get to our matchups of the game. We'll do first, second, third, fourth down. Then we'll get to our player matchups. Hawks to Soar, players we think can set up to have a big game. And then we'll add a new segment this year on our game previews, which is a pick-up prop with FanDuel. Okay, matchups of the game. First down is special teams. Lindenwood actually, even though they weren't a great team last season and aren't expected to be by some of the metrics coming into this year, they did rank 19th on special teams by Pro Football Focus among FCS teams a season ago. And I think that's interesting because the first game of the season, maybe you're more prone to special teams mistakes. And so also you look at it where Kansas is heavy favorite, over 40-point favorite. What is one way that the opposition could make you sweat it out a little bit early or make things closer than it possibly could be? It would be a special teams sway. Like they have a kick return for a touchdown, you muff a punt, right? That could be a 14-point swing. And all of a sudden, instead of it being 28-7 at halftime, it's, 21-14 or something like that, right? Where it's a much different game or you just feel like things are a little bit tight. And for Kansas, they had a good first half of the season last year on special teams. But the back half of the season, you had too many mistakes. All the blocked PATs against Oklahoma State, some missed field goals in the second half after being more perfect in the first half. The K-State game, obviously, you think of. At the end of the day, you look at like ESPN, SP+, they ended up about nationally average on special teams in terms of where they were. So you're looking for improvement this year, and this is a good opportunity to show that against a team who actually was pretty good at it a season ago. Plus, you got certain battles going on. Obviously, Tabor Island won the kicker battle, but are we still going to see Charlie Weinrich and or Owen Pieper Gertis come into a field goal or a PAT situation to see what they can do? It seems like Damon Greaves is settled in at the punter, but what about the return spots? Like, what does that look like? So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup in this game. Second down, KU figuring out their offensive line machinations in game and just road grading Lindenwood's defensive line. This is partially one of those things where it's like, just worry about yourself. And it's also just, dominating the opponent. So KU starting offensive line, they're starting Bryce Cable at left tackle, Logan Brown at right tackle, Michael Ford at left guard, Kobe Baines at right guard, and then Bryce Foster at the center position. But like they're going to rotate other linemen in. Like Daryl Simmons is going to play. Shane Baumgartner probably going to play. Nolan Gorchika probably going to play. And then you'll have other linemen play too as the game goes on and you're blowing out the opponent and everything. But Kansas kind of settled on, it seemed like, that rotation of linemen a little bit later in the game, and at least as far as like where the tackles are positioned with that kind of switch happening. So what happens if it's just not working well and they decide to switch back or they decide to switch somebody else in some other position? It's possible. I'm not expecting it to happen, but yeah, just figuring out what your best situation for different plays are and what everybody is best at and seeing that on the field and seeing if Bryce Foster and Logan Brown can kind of raise the ceiling of this position unit. And I look at last year, Austin Peay ran for 270 yards on Lindenwood. Now, Austin Peay was I think they were a playoff team. Their coach got parlayed that into a job at UTEP. So they were a good team, but like if you're taking Austin P from last year, Kansas this year, you're obviously taking Kansas, especially the run game. 4 teams of the 10 that they played, so 40% of the time, notched over 200 yards rushing on this defense on the ground. You should be able to road grade them. 300 yards plus rushing for KU is kind of my expectation in this one, and a big reason why I think the offensive line should be able to road grade them. Third down, KU pass rush versus the Lindenwood offensive line. Lindenwood was not good in pass blocking a season ago. They gave up 5 or more sacks on 3 occasions, which is a lot. They gave up a high of 7 sacks in a game last season, and they only kept the QB without a sack twice. So in 8 of their 10 games, they gave up at least a sack. They gave up 3 or more sacks in 6 of their 10 games. So more than half the time, more often than not, they were giving up 3 or more sacks in a game, and that was without playing an FBS opponent. Well, enter KU, who there were some questions about who is going to provide the pass rush after losing Austin Booker, and those things still exist coming into the season. But it feels like, at least on paper, or at least the feeling coming into the season, is that KU has a group of hungry pass rushers that have potential and have ceiling to make this thing work. Whether that's Dean Miller, DJ Warner, Dak Brinkley, Bai Jobe, the strong defensive ends, and Jeremy Robinson, Dylan Woodkey, some good defensive tackles, that they're going to be able to make this thing work, that they're going to be able to have the requisite pass rush to get it done. And as much as if the offensive line and defensive line dominates this game, we're going to point to that and say, good, they should, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll dominate against Illinois and West Virginia and some of these other teams. It has been a bit of a precursor the past couple of years. Kyron Johnson had himself a good game against South Dakota in 2021 in Lance Leipold's first year. Lonnie Phelps had 4 TFLs, 3 sacks 2 years ago. Austin Booker, I think, had a sack and had maybe like a couple quarterback hits. I don't remember if he had the sack or not, but a couple quarterback hits and had a couple real nice pass rush moves or quick get-offs the line that it was noticeable. Point being, if one of these players has 3 sacks in this game, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to have 3 sacks again all season long. But what it does tell me is that, see, in a real game situation, in a real game setting, they're ready to go and they have juice. So how much it translates to the games the rest of the season, you don't totally know, but it does at least give you an indication that you're on the right path. And so I am very curious who those end up being and if KU can kind of dominate there. 4th down, confident, not cocky. KU should be confident. This doesn't just apply for this game where you're over a 40-point favorite. This season, you've accomplished a lot. You've brought this program to a much, I could say that a million times, better place from where it was. At the same point in time, there's that line. You don't want to overlook an opponent. You don't want to overlook anybody, even this one. So just take care of business. Focus on you, do your job every play, and you'll find yourself pretty high up on the scoreboard at the end of the game in what could be a 40, 50, 60-point victory if you're KU. Let's finish up. Players to watch, Hawks to Soar, pick a prop on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. We're going to do our pick a prop, which will have some stuff from FanDuel, or normally will, each and every week. And you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're also brought to you by Factor. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor Fresh's never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day that you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? They have 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have a new flavor to explore. I love a lot of the chicken dishes. The pork dishes are really good too. It's super easy to make. And for me, as a parent, sometimes you don't always have the time to cook a extravagant meal. And so me and my wife were chowing down some of those the other week. It made life so much easier. And you just would have thought that like a chef made them for you in your kitchen. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50, factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Finishing up with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with our player matchups, our Hawks and Soar, pick a prop. And don't forget, we're going to have a post-game show, which will be up shortly after the result for KU. So you can tune into that Thursday night. You can tune into that Friday morning, whatever you'd like. So make sure you are subscribed to the show anywhere you get your podcasts here with Locked On Jayhawks. Okay, our player matchup to watch. We're going to go with Luke Grimm, KU receiver, versus Talon Blaylock. So Talon Blaylock is a defensive back for Lindenwood. He's a former transfer from Sam Houston State, which is used to be an FCS team for a while, now is an FBS team in their second year of the FBS. He plays safety, he plays some slot, and he plays some hybrid stuff for Lindenwood. At least he did last year, so I'm kind of assuming he's going to do the same this year. He had the 5th most tackles on the team last season. He was one of the better defenders on the team. He's a playmaking safety. He had 3 interceptions last year, which led the team. So there's some good things about him. But if you look into his Pro Football Focus coverage grades, he was targeted 31 times last year. On those 31, he allowed a 71% completion rate. That's not great. He allowed over 15 yards per catch. That's not great. And he allowed 5 touchdowns and had 3 penalties. Neither one of those is that great. But because the 3 interceptions, very much boom or bust, right? So he can make a swing play his way, or he might give up a big one the other way. So for Kansas to win this matchup, especially if he's in the slot, you think of him on Luke Grimm a lot, avoid the pick to him to where he can feast, maybe have a double move, maybe have some plays where you can play off his aggressiveness and work that into an advantage for you. And if you don't give him the chance to feast, then you should be able to feast and make it famine for them. Hawks to Soar for KU. On offense, we're going to go Devin Neal and Daniel Hishaw. I don't know how many times Devin Neal is going to carry the ball in the FCS game. I mean, we've seen past FCS games where Devin Neal's had single-digit carries. I want to say in the Tennessee Tech game, didn't he have like 4 carries or something like that? And he's actually had a touchdown on his first carry the last 2 years on the first carry of the season against FCS opponents. So we'll see if he can do that again in this one. But I went back and looked at Jeff Grimes' past games against FCS opponents. Now, I don't know how much of the player usage is based on like the running backs coach versus the offensive coordinator versus the head coach versus all 3 of them or something like that. Maybe it's different in each college, but from what you can see with Jeff Grimes from really the last handful of games he played against FCS opponents, his lead back wasn't getting 20 carries or something like that, but they were getting 10, 12, 14 carries in the game, which would certainly be more than Devin Neal's kind of gotten in the last couple FCS games, which means if Devin Neal gets 10, 12 carries in this game, he could legitimately have 150, 200 yards rushing. At the very least, you kind of expect 100. So I do wonder if the prop on this, because as of right now, as I'm recording on Thursday night, the props are not up, which I'd imagine because it's week 1 of the season, that's just taking longer to get into with making sure everybody's healthy and who's going to be playing and what the props should be. So you can probably look at FanDuel and they're up by now. Maybe Devin Neal's would be lower because they're not expecting him to have that many carries. Maybe it's one where he is really high because they are expecting him to just dominate against an FCS opponent. I don't totally know, but I do think he's set up to have a big game. And then if he doesn't have as many carries, or even if he does have 10 to 12, there's still going to be a lot more other ones to have. That means probably big games for Daniel Hishaw and some of the other running backs. I'm excited to see Harry Stewart and Savion Morrison too. Defense, Hawks to Soar, we're going to go with DJ Withers. Been hearing about him all camp long, that he's having a really good camp. He's been a guy who seemingly has progressed each and every year. Now you're playing a worse offensive line than you've been going up against in camp, right? At least you would hope. Go out there and dominate the game, right? Go out there and get a sack. It's harder for interior guys to get sacks, but that would be a pretty big deal if he does. And you look at some of the, we talked about it on past shows. Thank you to everydayers tuning into this. But the Lindenwood pass blocking and run blocking grades were not great a season ago. They didn't have a lot of individuals get above 60 in either run blocking or pass blocking a season ago. He should be able to dominate. Okay, pick a prop. So we're going to, I love ice cream. So we're going to do scoops and sprinkles. So scoop is our big one. And then the sprinkle is one that, maybe a little less invested in, but maybe has a little bit more outlandish odds possibly. So again, the props are not out as of when I'm recording. I'm sure they will be out closer to kickoff here, just with this one kind of being the exception. So this is me just basing it on the spread right now. The over-under in the game is 59.5. The spread is 44.5. What that tells you is that basically FanDuel is saying the game score should be somewhere around, what would that be? Minus 44.5. So you're looking at like 52-7, right? I mean, that'd be covering 45 points. That'd get you to 59 points. So if you're looking at 52-7, that means the over-under for Kansas points would be like basically 52. I would go over that. And if I can even find an alt line where it's like 55, maybe even 60, I might be interested in that. But let's just say for the scoop here, going over on the Kansas points. And maybe if that's not even available, you just take the over on the game. So again, as I said, I went back and looked at Jeff Grimes' past performances in FCS games. And again, this isn't all on the offensive coordinator, but 2023 Baylor was an anomaly. That was just not a good offense. 3 previous Jeff Grimes offenses against their FCS opponents. 2022 Baylor scored 69. 2021 Baylor scored 60. And 2020 BYU also scored 66 points. So they were able to continue piling on the score. And maybe that happens for Kansas in a game where you are clearly the better team. So that's my pick of prop, Kansas over on points. And then for the scoop, for the sprinkle, we're going to go with Daniel Hishaw, 2 touchdowns. I'm open to, if this is like plus 200 on like 1 touchdown, I would just take that. But I'm assuming 1 touchdown is going to be like plus 120, 140, somewhere in that. I think 2 touchdowns, you'll be able to get good odds. I think the fact that he is a power running back, he'll be in a lot, especially if Devin Neal gets limited carries. He'll have an opportunity. Also, I'd be interested in, if it's there, Harry Stewart to get a touchdown in this game. So those are the props we're looking at. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back later tonight / Friday morning for a post-game recap of whatever happens between Kansas and Lindenwood. We're finally here. Football's back. KU football's back. Hope if you're going to the game, you have a great time. You stay safe. If you're watching at home, enjoy that too. And we'll see you next time with LOJ.